Brought to you by Williams. We make clean energy happen.
What's the point of living if you're not being of service? And the service I feel like I'm good at providing is explaining insane crap and making it make sense.
I'm Ifeanyi, and this is Creative Control. Each month, I'll be interviewing your favorite celebrities and creators to unpack what's at the intersection of creativity, business, and brand building. In this episode, a conversation with award-winning journalist and best-selling author, Joy Reid. For over a decade, Joy Reid became one of the most prominent journalists at MSNBC. She led 3 shows at the network, and her razor-sharp commentary garnered top ratings, a loyal following, an Emmy nomination, and an NAACP Image Award. And then she was fired. Back in February, MSNBC announced a shakeup at the network, and much to the surprise of Joy's audience and Joy herself, her show The ReidOut was one of the casualties. But just a few months later, we have The Joy Reid Show, a podcast independently produced by Joy herself. I wanted to speak with Joy to understand her point of view of the media landscape today and what it means to own your content and audience, or to have creative control, as it were. So to start, I asked Joy how she went from being pre-med at Harvard to building the career in journalism and media she has now.
When I was in probably 6th grade, 7th grade, the Iran hostage crisis happened, ironically enough, given where we are today.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. And I just became really fascinated with it. I was sitting up one night because I used to like to stay up late and watch like scary movies. And I would try to stay up as late as I could. I was not a sleeper even then. And I was sitting up watching this coverage of the Iran hostage crisis. And my mother actually let me sit up and watch it. And I sat up probably till midnight watching it. The first night that it was being covered, it was covered late into the night into a show that eventually was called Nightline. And the next night I asked my mom, can I watch it again? Because we watched, the 11 o'clock news, and then it went right into Nightline. And she said, sure. And I followed that Iran hostage crisis literally every day for however long it lasted, a year or whatever. And I became a Nightline viewer because my mother let me sit up and watch it. She figured it's educational, it's news, and she was a news junkie too. At the same time, I had made the mistake when I was probably like 12 years old of telling my West Indian mother that I was going to be a doctor. And my sister said she was going to be a lawyer. Who was like 6, said he was going to be an architect. So, West Indians are like, doctor, lawyer, architect, I'm set. My children are going to be successful.
You are talking to the youngest of 2 doctors and an engineer, and I'm a journalist, so I get you, okay? Like I'm Nigerian over here, so I get it.
Oh, you're Nigerian, so if you're done. And my father is African, so between the Africans and the Caribbeans, they don't see another path for their children but doctor, lawyer, engineer. If you're not one of those things, they're like, my child is a failure, I don't know what happened to them. So that's where I was supposed to be, and so I did that because I was a mama's girl. I was kind of, a lot of people are daddy's girls. I was a mama's girl. And I always wanted my mother to be happy. And she loved the idea of me being a doctor. So I was going to go along with it. And a lot of our family are doctors on her side, on the Guyanese side. So I applied to lots of colleges. After, we had the Harvard recruiter lady come to Denver and different folks. And I applied to Harvard and Yale and Vassar and University of Denver and Brown. I got into all of them. But I got into all of them as a pre-med. So when and you get into Harvard, in Philomena's house, you got to go to Harvard. So I picked Harvard. Philomena was like, you get into Harvard, you got to go to Harvard. But unfortunately, about 22 days before I was to start, my mom passed away.
Yeah.
And like I said, she and I were super duper close. I was the middle child. I was like her little baby bestie, we did. And I really was only being a pre-med for her. So I tried. I went to, matriculated to Harvard. Family friends took me up to Boston, dropped me off. But I was like really in a deep depression my freshman year. And I didn't even know what depression was back then because I'm Gen X. We were just feral. We didn't believe in emotions.
Not feral.
Gen X, we were so, my mother was hard, she worked 3 jobs. Like when she got home, I had dinner on the table. Okay.
Y'all are like the brass knuckle, tough as nails generation. My God, listen. Respect.
My husband has a t-shirt that says Gen X grew up drinking water from a hose. Okay. That is real talk. Like, we literally drank hose water. Like, this is real. We were home till the lights came on. My parents didn't see us until dark. And all of a sudden we were home.
Y'all are just different. And I appreciate
We
that.
had a key around our neck, and if you lose the key, you had to climb in the window. I've had to climb in the window because I lost my key around my neck. Like, this is our
X
life.
built different, but please continue.
Built different. Built by ourselves. We didn't even have, we barely had parents. Lightly raised. We were lightly raised.
Lightly raised.
So,
a suggestion of upbringing.
A hint of raising. We just a little Scotia raised. They were just like, we had you. What more do you want? We're busy. We're working. We're boomers. So when I got to Harvard, I was literally self-raised, because now I was an orphan, because my father was not in our lives. He was a phone call every 3 years. He was not somebody we were raised by. But Harvard thought he should pay. So they transferred what would have been his contribution to my education onto me. So I had to work my way through college because they expected me to pay his bills. And so I had 4 jobs. I washed blackboards. I drove the shuttle bus. I was actually the funnest shuttle bus driver. I used to be able to back a bus.
I can imagine. Listen, we're like 5 minutes into this conversation. I'm already like,
my bus had music bumping. I'll be like, y'all want me to speed down this hill? They'd be like, yeah. And I'm like, let's speed. Y'all little rich asses. Because I was poor. So I was poor. So I had to work. I waited tables at the Marriott Marquis, where the old men pinch your butt while you're trying to serve them salads. So I was working. I was a working student, but what I was not was a good pre-med. And, for the first time in my life, I got bad grades. I had never gotten, one C I ever got in my whole life was in typing. And my mother was enraged and came to the school, and I thought she was going to hurt the teacher because they were ruining my GPA. After a year of trying to be a really failing pre-med, because I just didn't, the whole idea of being a doctor when your mother dies of cancer and you feel failed by the medical system and don't believe in it, it really doesn't help you do better in school. And I just wasn't interested. I didn't care. I just didn't have any motivation. And I was going to fail out of school. And I wasn't used to failure.
I bet. So, as I understand it, you moved back to Brooklyn, where you're originally from, started working in the film industry, and when you went back to Harvard, you earned your degree in film studies. But your career in news really started in Florida. So how did that come about?
I had to kind of start over, because in that market, you really need to be fluently bilingual in English and Spanish in order to work in any meaningful industry. And I had a marketing job in New York and just really couldn't continue that there. And so I decided, you know what, I'm starting over. I'm in a new state. I can't do like a sort of marketing related job, but I can try to do something that I actually love. It was a chance to start over. And I just started asking myself, well, what do I like? What do I enjoy? Well, I really love the news. I was an interested news junkie. So I literally wrote a letter to the Fox affiliate, WSVN, and it was a 2-line letter. And it said, I really love, and actually they had an entertainment show. I really love your entertainment show, whatever the name of it was. Would you hire me, please? With a question mark. And weirdly enough, they wrote back. This is a true story. They wrote me back and they were like, we don't have a job for you on the entertainment show, but we do have a job for our morning news show, and we need associate producers. And I went in for the interview, and the job was writing and pulling video for the morning news. And I was like, look at God, because I love news. I was a news junkie, and they were going to put me in a newsroom with this thing called iNews, where I could get all the news I could possibly want. And I took the job for $7.50 an hour. I had to get a second job as a copywriter at Burdine's department store in order for my husband and I to pay our bills, because he had a job at Discovery Channel, but we needed all the income we could get. And so I had these 2 jobs. I was a copywriter during the day. I would get at 2 a.m, I would show up at WSVN to the Plex, the Newsplex, and write the morning show, and then get on a little bus and go to Burdine's. And so that was my first news job. And as exhausting as it was with 2 toddlers.
Oh my God.
And then as life happens, I got pregnant with our 3rd child, and it was just too much to do the 2 jobs. And I needed 1 job that I could pay our bills with. So I wrote another letter, and this time I wrote to the NBC affiliate that was 10 minutes from where we had moved, to the house we had moved to in Pembroke Pines, Florida, and they had opened themselves in Pembroke Pines. And I said, look, hire me. And they weirdly enough, hired me because I used to host this thing called the Amateur Pundit. This is another true story. And it was just my little thoughts that I would post online.
Huh.
And by coincidence, the guy who was hiring for the digital editor job at NBC was one of my 300 readers of the Amateur Pundit. Maybe 300 people read that thing. This guy was one of them. And he was like, I love your writing. I think you're, really smart, and I'm going to hire you for this job. So I wound up inside of the NBC universe because of the Amateur Pundit that I wrote online. And I was a digital editor and loved it until the war in Iraq made me hate it, because sitting in a newsroom when we were dropping, carpet bombing Baghdad, and listening to my fellow journalists literally cheer for a war that was killing people. It just was unacceptable to me morally. So I quit. But up until then, I loved the job.
Right. One thing I'm curious about is this idea of objectivity in the news, right? So you started your career as a more traditional anchor, if you will, but what we've come to know you for is this more unfiltered approach to the news that you had on your MSNBC show, the ReidOut, and that you certainly have on your new independent show, the Joy Reid Show, which we will definitely get to in a moment. So what is your opinion on objectivity in the news?
I don't believe in objectivity. I used to do a lecture about this when I taught at Syracuse and when I taught at Howard University, because I think objectivity is an invention of white journalists in the early 20th century, when all the journalists were white men. And so what do they mean by objectivity? They mean the point of view that they agree with and that they've all agreed to. And if you don't agree with that point of view, you're not objective. I object to that. And I believe that what happens is everyone brings their perspective to their journalism, everyone.
Yes.
And if your perspective is that you've always been a privileged person that's never financially struggled, that's never had to deal with want, that's never had to deal with discrimination, that's not because you're objective, it's because you're privileged. And so therefore, your take on what's happening comes from that perspective. And just because my take comes from the perspective of being a Black child of immigrants, a woman, someone who's faced discrimination, somebody who's heard the N-word with a hard R, that means that I'm coming from that perspective, someone who doesn't trust the police and has had to warn my kids about cops. So when I was doing the Trayvon Martin and other Black Lives Matter stories, that was my perspective, someone who's very skeptical of the police. And that doesn't mean I'm not objective. It means that my perspective feeds the way I do journalism, just the way your privileged perspective as a white journalist who trusts the police feeds your perspective. We're two perspectives, and both those perspectives are valuable. And so I don't believe in objectivity. And I think whether I've been on the day side, sort of straight news side of journalism, or an opinion, quote unquote, opinion analysis show, I still do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I approach everything with the skepticism I was born with and that my immigrant and Black African-American background gave me. And I think what the media needs to do is stop demanding objectivity and start recognizing the value of all those perspectives.
More from Joy Reid after this quick break.
As affordable, reliable energy demand increases at historic rates, one company is uniquely positioned to accelerate America forward: Williams. We have 117 years of know-how in powering progress, and we're ready to power the next 100 years of innovation. Learn how our natural gas infrastructure is critical to the future of AI at williams.com.
We're back with my conversation with journalist and author Joy Reid. Last month, she announced the Joy Reid Show, which is her independently run podcast under her own production company, Image Lab Media Group. But that push really came from MSNBC pulling the plug on her highly rated show, The ReidOut, in February. So I wanted to know what perspective she's gained from getting fired and how she pivoted so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, to quote Friday, how you gonna get fired on your day off? I literally got fired on my day off. What? During Black History Month, mind you.
You can never forget that part because, okay, the The audacity of it all, but it's fine.
The audacity. I got doged. I got doged, man. And all my team got doged.
Yeah.
What I would say perspective-wise, the biggest surprise was, first of all, the actual firing did come out of the blue. We didn't have a warning. There was no sort of warning, HR warning, you're going to get fired, so that would be prepared for it. There was a leak. Dylan Byers did a leaked story, and then it turned out within 24 hours to be true and was verified the next day when the president of MSNBC called me with the African-American head of HR on the phone with her and read a script into the phone. We're making some changes, yada, yada, yada. She didn't give a reason. She just announced it literally read a script to me. And I was like, first of all, that audacity, that's quite a way to end a relationship that had lasted 14 years,
right.
Not with her in place, but with, previous people. And I'm not sure that's the way anyone else would have done it, but that's the way she did. And I can't judge that. That is her style. And I think that's whatever it is. And these companies can do whatever they want. I don't own MSNBC or Comcast. They can do whatever they want. And I don't have a right to a show. There's no human right to have a television show.
Sure.
They can fire me. It's fine. But what I will say is that as I look back and I think about what the ingredients to that were and what the environment for me had been, particularly since October 7, the October 7 attacks in Gaza, the environment had been difficult. I was in disalignment with management on the way that I was covering Gaza, and not just on air, but also on social media. They were very uncomfortable with some of the ways that I sort of snarky toward Donald Trump.
Sure.
But I figure he's snarky toward people. I could be snarky toward him, and his movement, doesn't respect people. So I'm not sure I needed to be super respectful. And I think embedded in the First Amendment is our ability to mock the president of the United States. If we can't mock the president of the United States, then we're not America. We are not a free country. I know in Iran, you can't mock the Ayatollah. You'll probably end up in prison or dead.
Sure.
You cannot mock Vladimir Putin in Russia. You'll probably end up in prison or dead. But you're supposed to be able to mock the American president. And I think I was in disalignment on those two issues. The way that I dealt with MAGA, the particular way we talked about him, and the way that I talked about Gaza. I am speculating that is the reason they wanted to make a change, because they never told me. But if I had to guess, that's what I would say.
And so with all of that in mind, take me back to those months between February and June, because that's not that much time. And you was just launched into this new show. That, to have something that was, it is devastating. You were such a prominent face in MSNBC and you built such a following. You gave a lot to that network. And so for it to end the way that it did, that's really devastating. But then come June, it's hey, back again, got my own show with no corporate governance. I'm out here, and it's so remarkable. So take me back to those months in between, and what was it like developing? When did this kick in that you were I want to do my own show, I want to do this on? Take me back to that moment.
Well, I have my husband and I have had a production company for many years, and the challenge has always been that we were always each working while we had this production company on the side. And we were trying to sort of build it while doing other things. And there were some limitations to that, including, the first right of refusal rights with, my company and all sorts of other things. But we had for a long time talked about, and he's been a big advocate, Jason, of doing independent media. So we'd had the conversation about doing a podcast, but we thought a few years from now, when I'm done with MSNBC and I kind of retire from the ReidOut, I figured I'd do the ReidOut for however many years, and then eventually we'd do a show. We didn't think it would have to be done immediately. Yeah. But once the firing happened, literally on the 24th, the firing happened. By the 25th, we were like, okay, what are we going to do? And we were like, we're going to do the show that we always wanted to do. That we're going to take this as an opportunity. It's interesting. Our youngest son, Miles, called me and he said, Mom, I'm not sure whether to say I'm sorry or congratulations. He's like, because you really have a chance to do something else. My brother said the same, who's a longtime broadcaster himself. And so I was getting the same message from people. They were like, this is sad, yes, but it's also a huge opportunity. And then life just started happening. Trump really started kidnapping. They started kidnapping people off the streets. They started really harming immigrant communities. They didn't wait. Donald Trump, he said about grabbing women by he doesn't wait. He just starts kissing. Well, he didn't wait. He just started kidnapping. And then Selma happened, and I had already committed to go to Selma. And then the State of the People Power Tour happened, which followed us doing a 24-hour marathon on the night of the joint address to Congress. And that turned into this tour, and I was swept into that. And so it's like life just kept happening. And so while that life was happening, we just started building this show. And we didn't have a long time to build it. The folks who booked this interview, DKC, had 4 days notice of our launch.
God.
But we started finding partners. My agency, WB, was really helpful in being like, let's identify some partners who can give you some back end support, because I'm not a YouTuber.
Sure.
My dear friend Adrian, she kindly signed on to help and executive produce. And this was literally friends coming together and saying, we're gonna help y'all launch this ship. And a small ragtag group of us, some who came from the cable world, some who I'd worked with at the Griot, where I had worked for and been managing editor, two who were my actual literal researchers on Medgar and Murley, on my New York Times bestseller.
Say it again.
Say it again. And so it was literally people like that, like people who I just knew, who were just my friends, and who just said, we're going to team up, and we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a budget, but we're going to make this thing happen. And we had a deadline that I kind of set for myself, because we got this interview with Ras Baraka, which is our first big interview we landed. And I wanted to get the show launched by the time that election happened. Unfortunately, he did not win the primary. But yeah, we just let time move us. It's a very Gen X way of living.
Listen, the hustler of all hustlers. You got to work. But no, I completely agree with your brother, with your son. Absolutely. Because it sounded like everything was aligning to this point of you just controlling your show, controlling what you put out into the world. And I'm just curious, I mean, like, what did you want the Joy Reid Show to be, or what didn't you want it to be? Like, knowing that you had this control.
Well, the thing that people say to me the most often, the most common sort of thread when I run into people on the street or in the airport or the movie theater, they'll say, they'll first of all say they are very angry that the show was canceled. That's the first thing they'll say. The second thing people will say is, what we loved about the ReidOut is that you were informing us. You were giving us the information, breaking it down so that we can understand all these insane things that are happening, and just breaking it down for us. And so that's what I wanted the Joy Reid Show to be. And that's what I want it to be, because that's the value that I feel like I bring to the world. And I feel like, what's the point of living if you're not being of service? And the service I feel like I'm good at providing is explaining insane crap and making it make sense. And so our job on the Joy Reid Show is to explain the insane crap that you're seeing, give it some context, historical context, some global context. I'm a global citizen. I'm a person that's an African, and I believe all Africans are Africans, whether they're born in the Caribbean, whether they're born in Brooklyn, New York, whether they're born in Chicago, or whether they're from Accra, Ghana, or South Africa, or Durban, South Africa. We're just African people in different contexts. And so I think a lot of the things that happen to us have a global context. And not even just things that happen to us. What's happening to us is happening to Russians. It's been happening to them. It's just now happening to us. What's happening to us is happening to Israelis. They have a Trump at the head of them who is also indicted, who is also a warmonger, who is also unrestrainable by the courts in his country. Bibi is Trump. So what's happening to Israelis and Palestinians is happening to us. And what's happening to people in El Salvador with their coolest dictator in the world is happening to us. And until you understand that in Venezuela, and even in some senses Cuba, all of these places that have autocrats and dictators, they all do the same things. They all act the same way. They all steal the same way. They all get really rich while people get poorer. They lock down the media. They constrain the media. They constrain lawyers. They gut the judicial system. They all do the same things. So we want to try to explain that global context to people so that people don't feel that this is some unique thing that is only happening to us.
Yeah, 1000%. And, I'm curious, it's because we talk about, you being able to control your show, you have your own production company, and which is amazing. But I feel like, and I completely love the idea of moving to YouTube and, having that autonomy, but YouTube is a corporate company. And so I don't know what thought you've given to the possibility of this company, shifting its alignment, their motivation, their policies that could affect such an outspoken voice such as yours. So I'm curious of when you think about this idea of controlling your show, controlling your production, how much control is there? And like, what thought are you giving long term?
Yeah. I mean, and before even I was doing this, I'm on Instagram. I was on Twitter, very early adopter of Twitter.
Oh, I'm very aware of all your where you reside in the social sphere.
All of these social media companies have taken the knee. I mean, Meta, they couldn't take the knee fast enough to flip to become MAGA.
They were just waiting. My God.
It was just waiting. And Mark Zuckerberg has never been a liberal. I don't know why people mistake these people for somehow socially liberal. Mark Zuckerberg and the Winklevoss twins created Facebook at Harvard, copying the notion of the freshman Facebook, which is literally what Harvard freshman boys use to rank the attractiveness of freshman girls and rate them for their affability. That's what Facebook was at Harvard, and they just took that and made it digital. So I don't know where people got the idea that this person would be a liberal, right? And he shoved the Winklevosses off of a bridge and deleted their existence the same way that Elon Musk pretended he invented Teslas and disappeared the Americans who really created it. So, these tech bros are all what they are. So it shouldn't shock anyone. Jack wasn't exactly liberal either.
No.
And so what you have is what they call the enshittification of these social media. And enshittification means you make people dependent on your social media app or your social media platform. And then you start not serving those people. You start serving the business interests who can pay you. When you get a platform for free, you're not the customer, you're the product. And this is a Stephanie Rule truism that is super true. If you're not paying for it, you are not the customer, you're the product. And then they start to get customers and they start to serve them because they're paying for the platform. And then they stop serving them too, because everyone is now dependent on the platform. And then they start to serve themselves and their own interests. And that is how you build a billionaire or a trillionaire. They all go that way. Facebook has gone that way, and Facebook was disastrous during the 2016 election. Disinformation, misinformation, COVID disinformation. Meta in general is a disaster and, was very aggressive about throttling anti-Trump content during the election. Something that happened on my own IG platform when throttling anything about Gaza. Happened on mine as well. And then it magically stopped after the election. I know what they are. I use those platforms because I have an audience there and I'm going to try to serve that audience. TikTok literally blasted across its entire platform after Trump threatened to shut them down, then tacoed on it like he always chickens out, decided not to cancel TikTok. And then they thanked Trump in a blast that everyone got, whether you wanted it or not, where they praised Trump like he's a dictator. They all do it, right? And so I always think ahead that each platform can be enshittified. I'm also on Substack. Substack is even more so than YouTube, a very open environment where you can control not only your own content, but also your list. Really great for an entrepreneur. Lots of people are critical of them because they don't censor who and what is on there. And I understand that criticism. But Substack is another opportunity to sort of create an audience and own that audience, and also YouTube as well. At any point, I guess, any of these companies could be enshittified because the owners of these companies could decide, hey, it's more profitable for me and I'll get closer to being a trillionaire by enshittifying my company. And we always have to understand that. We don't own these companies. And as Black people, we particularly need to think about the fact we do not own these platforms. We're using other people's OPP, other people's property, to build our businesses on. And so there's a risk of that. We are renters and not owners in these platforms. And so I always operate the same way I understood that I'm not entitled. I don't have a civil right to have a TV show. And then they can cancel it at any time. That's just something you live with when you're a TV person. You know that your show could be canceled. It's something you live with. And in this case, in building this business, I understand and we have to plan for the fact that this audience we're building, we need to make sure that we own as much of the access to it as possible, because at any point, that platform could decide to take the knee to Trump. That platform could decide having a relationship with this regime is more important than you having access to information. And so I think, have to have real serious inner conversations, especially among African Americans, Black folks. We need to start owning the platforms. And not just Black people. I'm talking about content creators, period, you need to think about it. Whatever you do and wherever you come from, whatever community you represent, do you own the platform that you're using to speak? Because if the platform was to shut you down, what are you going to do? And I think we all need to be thinking about that.
So when are we getting Joy Book or Reidstagram, or when are we getting this?
I'm going to go for Joy Book because I use so many Reid puns. My husband's family has benefited so much from our marriage. That's what we said. We're going to name one thing Joy, because everything has been the ReidOut, the Reid Report. Jason gets all the glory. Everything is a Reid pun.
I'm telling, let's go with Joy Book. And I want this for you because you are 100% correct. I mean, this is something that I talk to a lot of creators, and I think that this is something that's always in the back of their mind, because we see this all the time with people getting shadow banned, with, them changing the algorithms. We see how the change of Google search can impact news and media outlets. Like, we are all at the whims of these companies, of these corporations. And so when you launched the Joy Reid Show, I mean, obviously this is incredible. And I saw a post that you surpassed like 1 million views on YouTube already. Like, I mean, clearly it's resonating with your audience. But speaking of your audience, I'm just so curious, because you've built such a loyal and dedicated audience. And I think and they've clearly followed you through your career. I mean, we're seeing it now with like these incredible numbers with the Joy Reid Show, and I know they're only going to continue. Like, you have a very amazing Substack. So what are the tenets of building and maintaining an audience?
Yeah, I think the most important thing in maintaining an audience is authenticity. It's very difficult to build an audience if you're sort of cosplaying as something else, right? And you can do it because people do like to hear what they want to hear. Then people on the right have been very savvy about this. They just tell their audience what they want to hear, and they build an audience that way. Long term, though, in terms of your credibility, I'm not sure that's the smartest way to do it. I think have an authentic voice. I always counsel people to be a writer. The written word is something you control, and that it cannot be removed or deleted. If I have to go to making a written newsletter, I can still speak because I can write. And I always considered myself a writer first and foremost before anything else. And so I try to keep that discipline going. I love my Substack because it lets me write, and it keeps me writing it in a disciplined way, but also use your voice, And so I have this sort of perfect storm where I can use my written voice on Substack. I can use my voice on YouTube. And I also would say that it's part of what I would counsel people is have multiple platforms where you are being heard and where you're being seen, because you can be your own whack-a-mole. And particularly when you're dealing with an autocratic regime, a fascist regime, what they want to do is try to snuff out your voice. But if you have multiple voices in multiple places and you're holding on to that list, one thing beautiful about Substack, you get that list, that's yours. Mm-hmm. Try to build a direct relationship with your audience. On YouTube, on our YouTube show, we're creating memberships. We're saying you can join, you can get directly to me so we can have an interpersonal relationship. That interpersonal relationship is not just critical for growing a platform, it's actually critical for surviving autocracy, because it is networks of people that defeat autocracy, not voices out there in the ether. So I would counsel people, build a network, whether you're doing it to have a YouTube show or whether you're just doing it to be sane and stay sane in this nightmarish time. Build a network, because it is that network that will help us survive.
Right. And to kind of just sum up everything we've been talking about, when you take a step back and look at the current media landscape, what does your presence mean within that landscape? Like, what do you see as your purpose, as your impact within the larger context of the media landscape as it is now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I'll very quickly, and I know we are closing, but I'll tell a quick story. Back in 2015 was the first time that I went to Selma for the Jubilee of the March over the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And I'm there with Melissa Harris Perry, my sister who
love her.
One of the fierce people. Let me fill in for her on the weekends on her amazing show, Nerdland. So I'm down there with Nerdland, and I see Gwen Ifill across the street. And I don't see too good because, like I told you, I got my
Coke
eyes
bottle
done.
glasses, yeah.
Right. But I had I had my contacts. I didn't have my contacts. I think I had my contacts in at that time. But I'm like, I think that's Gwen Ifill. And I saw her. And of course, because she was one of the few Black women, that I saw on TV, I idolized this woman. So I saw her and I started running across the street without thinking twice. about cars, traffic. But I just ran across the street and was like, oh my God, Gwen, I'm your biggest fan. Oh my God, I love you so much. And she could have thought stalker and maybe punched me in the face. Instead, opened her arms up and gave me a big hug. And she said, thank you, my dear. And we had a wonderful conversation. And she was so kind and warm. And to me, that was like my moment of I felt so proud that I was in the same industry as her, just to work in the industry as her. Later on, one of her producers actually was one of my producers. And her impact on me was that she inspired me. She made me believe that someone who looked like me with my hair texture, with my complexion could actually be a journalist. And that's what she did for me. What I'm hoping that I do, as putting myself in her position, is that if nothing else, I hope that I can help people break the fear of saying the things. There are things that we are dissuaded from saying in the media about race, about Palestine, about genocide. The worst thing that could happen to you if you just say the thing you see is you lose your job. And then you have to find another one. That is not the end of the world. And I think people hold back on being honest and being truthful for fear of losing that gig. And for a lot of people, losing that gig is catastrophic and the end of your world. But I, as I said earlier, come from a place of privilege. I have the privilege of being a Harvard-educated girl who's got the credentials and the book sales and the privileged life that I'm so thankful for. I thank God for that I can land on my feet if somebody takes a job away from me. I can be the person who employs me. And that's a very lucky place to be. Not every person, particularly not every Black person, has that opportunity. So I am so grateful for it. But take the risk to the extent that you can of being honest as a journalist. The worst thing that could happen is you could have yourself a hit YouTube show.
Oh, Joy, this has been absolutely wonderful. And it is such a privilege to talk to, not only a fellow journalist. I mean, I love talking to my people, but I love talking to my people. And what you have done so far in your career, because I'm so excited to see what you built, what you continue to build out with the Joy Reid Show has just been so awe-inspiring. So thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on the continued success of your show.
Thank you so much.
That's going to do it for this episode of Creative Control. But don't worry, I'll be back sooner than you think. And also, let me know what you think of this new season of the podcast. You can hit me up on any of my socials or just leave a comment wherever you listen to your podcast. I just hope you're gaining as many insights from my guests as I've been. Creative Control is part of the Fast Company Podcast Network. Our show is produced and edited by Blake Odom with help from Avery Miles, Sam Gebauer, and Hawa Atori. Mix and sound design is by Nicholas Torres, and our executive producer is Josh Christensen. Be sure to subscribe to Creative Control on your platform of choice, and I'll see you in a few weeks.